The 90s were a special time for TV. I spent most of my mornings and after school watching Nickelodeon, WB39, Cartoon Network, Cartoon Network's Toonami, and Disney Channel, to name just a few. I'm not going to get into the specifics of what shows I watched because, well, this video is not about that. My point is that growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, there was a strong attraction to up and rising TV shows, specifically sitcoms. Shows like Family Matters, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Sister Sister, Cousin Skeeter, Kenan and Kel, Martin and Moesha. And I'm sure that you found the similarity with all these shows. They were a part of, not the beginning, but a big chunk of what some people call the Black Renaissance or African American Renaissance of TV. These shows were important for the Black audience because teens during that time felt represented, included, many even felt connections to characters or some sort of relationship that could be categorized as TV parenting. You the only father that I ever knew. There were countless shows that appeared in the early 90s and early 2000s that created the kind of TV family, the second family, that we tried to emulate or wish we were a part of. Shows such as Full House, Family Matters, and many others. And to see that the minorities were getting represented, specifically the African American community, is not an off-brand series, yet rather mainstream, competing with the likes of other top chart white shows or shows with mainly white characters. I believe this time was important because it showed the viewers that yes, we are here and we are being represented. This video is going to go over the Latino experience, which is why I will not continue going over the well-respected Black TV shows and Asian shows. As a Latino, I'm a fan of all these shows, however, I'm not a part of their culture. And out of respect, I would recommend visiting other blogs or videos on the internet that go over their topics on a better, more educated light. I am not a media critic or a professional in any regards to the entertainment industry. I'm simply a man who has watched and enjoyed sitcoms for over 20 years and studied film for 3 years. As someone who is currently writing scripts and pursuing a life in the industry, I've grown to love researching and studying film. The characters, plot, even dialogue. Comedies, for example, run for a 30-minute spot per episode. However, there has to be a reason to identify with the main characters, all while being humorous and sticking to the plot. In the 2000s, there was a small yet noticeable rise of Latino sitcoms with shows like The Brothers Garcia, Wizards of Waverly Place, Taina, which as a Puerto Rican was very cool to see a show that was like the Spanish Moesha. And of course, Ugly Betty and George Lopez, the latter being one of my all-time favorite shows in general.
Sorry, what were you saying? How can I help
you? Latinos aren't new to Hollywood. In the 1950s, Debbie Anaz made it as a mainstream icon with I Love Lucy. He not only acted but produced the show, something that many Latinos could do at that time. I can spend hours talking about the influence Latinos have made to TV and cinema, but once again, this video is not about that. After the early 2000s, there was a dry period on Latino main role shows, and like the African American community, we seem to sink back to the 1970s, 1980s as token minorities to mainly white lead roles.
I think it's like this. We have we got a cast with like 5 people. Mm-hmm. Well, we got to have this guy, we got to have our main guy, we have our main girl, and they're mostly white. And then they need a brown or a black friend. And that's kind of where it is. So it's like, oh, I have a black friend, maybe I don't need a brown one. It's like that. Yeah. So we're kind of like that dice that's rolled.
We had shows co-written, co-produced, and mainly acted by Latinos for Latinos, but also mainstream enough to be appreciated by all races. Shows that were broadcasted on more than 2 networks and weren't in networks specifically for that minority. What happened? Over the years, we just began to go back to the old ways of Hollywood. I would like to state that what I'm about to say is more closely related to an opinion as it is a fact. With that being said, I hope that although you may not agree with what I'm about to say, you reflect on the views as a valid statement. The reason why shows like On My Block are important for Latinos is because aside from being main role actors, there are main role Latinos behind the camera as well.
Well, I think for me, being Mexican, I was born in Compton, grew up in Linwood. I'm incredibly proud of the show because the show is a reflection of the way I grew up. Ruby is loosely based on me. And when you're sitting there and you're watching a show about people of color, made by people of color, there's an authenticity to it.
The only way that we can break stereotypes and properly represent how someone talks and acts is by having someone of that ethnic group writing how they would talk and act. It goes back to the writers, producers, directors, the writing team. If the show is following teenagers in high school, it would only make sense to have millennials in the writing team that can relate more to Gen Z than Gen Y or baby boomers can. This new generation of kids are listening to music, watching shows and movies mostly performed by millennials. Therefore, to properly represent how these kids talk, dress, and act, the whole team behind the cameras needs to understand this age's culture. The same goes for Latino characters. I've seen shows and movies where the Spanish felt forced, like it didn't belong, or it was hardly ever used in sentences correctly. So definitely speech is the first most important thing.
Why are you talking like that?
Why are you?
Secondly, the personalities of the main characters. Have you noticed when most sitcoms have one dumb character? This show actually doesn't have any dumb characters. In fact, all these characters defy stereotypes and cliches. And there's a vast depth to all these characters. And lastly, the setting. Although they did not spend much time decompressing political agendas, they still bring up topics which affect the Latino community, like teenage pregnancies, death, deportation, colorism, and in many neighborhoods, gangs.
I grew up in the Valley, North Hollywood, you know, born and raised right here.
Home.
And when I watched the show, I was like, that's like my neighborhood. These are like the people that I grew up with. And what I love to see as, like, for me growing up, there wasn't a lot of Latinas on TV. And for me to be like, wait, Latina.
This show reaches out to young people in a crucial stage in their life, which is high school, and everything surrounding that setting. The drugs, parties, and sex aren't over cliched, but rather shown in an organic way in which scenes like these may happen, all while not glorifying or shaming such acts. In other words, On My Block works like any other sitcom, with sparks of drama becoming relatable to any ethnicity. On My Block is important for Latinos because of the solid representation of teenagers of Latin descent. It not only is specifically important to Latino kids living in hoods or underprivileged neighborhoods, but also any teenager who struggles with the dilemma of, am I Latino enough or am I American enough? Latino culture and even Spanglish is welcome and even encouraged. It doesn't look lame, and neither being Latino or American is sacrifice. It is another show where Latino kids can see being a Latino as something cool, being proud and not an afterthought. Shows like On My Block are important for Latinos because maybe, just maybe, they are part of the new Latino renaissance.